Competition Bureau. First of all, maybe I could ask you, can you briefly tell me what the Competition Bureau does for our listeners? What do you guys do over there?
Sure. So the main thing that we do is ensure that markets are competitive and innovative for Canadians, because when you have competitive markets, Canadians will often get lower prices, more choice, more innovation.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Let's talk about this ride-hailing business. How do you think it should be regulated here in BC?
Well, we made a number of recommendations to the BC Standing Committee, and they really boil down to two main points. The first one is that markets will often deliver the best outcomes on their own, and so instead of regulating things like caps on the number of drivers, geographic boundaries, price regulation, just let the principles of supply and demand really decide what is best in the market. And then the second recommendation is if there are regulations, to ensure that those regulations are being, that everybody has to play by the same rules, that there's a level playing field. Because when companies have an equal opportunity to compete with one another, that's when you'll get those good things for consumers like lower prices and more choice.
Okay, thank goodness I'm hearing this. I love what the Competition Bureau is saying here. Can you tell me, with the government here talking about potential caps on the number of drivers, operational boundaries, government price controls on what ride-hailing companies can charge, is there any other jurisdiction in Canada that runs ride-hailing this way?
Well, I won't speak about the particular rules in the different jurisdictions. What I will say is that there are 4 other jurisdictions in Canada that have put in place rules that allow ride sharing. So Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton. And it may be worthwhile to take a look at those and see whether there are particular regulations that have worked out or that haven't worked out in those jurisdictions.
Why do you think it's important to let the free market, as you mentioned, sort of drive these things, like the number of drivers on the road, where they can operate, how much they can charge? Why do you guys feel that should be left up to market forces?
Market forces will often get you the best competition. And what we've seen is that when you allow more competition in this space, there's some real benefits for consumers. So the City of Ottawa put out a report a few years ago where they said that Uber prices are 36% less than taxi prices on average. Wow. And also passengers in Ottawa wait between 5 to 15 minutes for a taxi versus 4 minutes for an Uber driver. So real clear benefits when competition is introduced into the market.
Okay, what about the taxi industry? The government here has said that they're concerned about the health of the taxi industry, that as they introduce competition from ride-hailing, they want to make sure that the taxi industry is protected and they don't suffer unduly. Do you have any thoughts on that?
There's a lot of really important policy considerations that need to be taken into account when making these big policy decisions. What we would say is that there needs to be the right balance between competition and regulation, and that there should only be regulation when it's necessary and when it's aimed at a very clear harm and when it's based on evidence.
Okay, for example, on the caps that the government has talked about, that they would want to put a limit on the number of ride-hailing drivers that would be allowed to operate let's say in Vancouver. The government has expressed concern about traffic gridlock, that there would be too many cars on the road. Suddenly everybody and their cousin is an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, and it's going to cause traffic congestion. That's one of the things that they've said they're concerned about when considering these caps. Do you have any thoughts on that from the Competition Bureau's point of view on that argument?
What I would say is that the government should be looking at what the evidence is. And so if they take a look at other cities in Canada that have introduced ride sharing and take a look at what that has meant for traffic, then they may be able to better craft a regulation around that.
Okay, and then what is the conditions in other jurisdictions, do you know? I mean, has there been traffic chaos in Toronto, for example?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Okay.
There's always traffic chaos in Toronto.
Let me ask you about the boundaries that the government has talked about. Right now, one of the sort of the attributes of the taxi system that we have in Metro Vancouver is we have these municipal operational boundaries, which are they just seem crazy. Like a taxi driver is not allowed to cross a municipal boundary, pick up a passenger, and come back. This is against the rules. Do you think that should be changed too? I mean, you were saying like it makes sense to have rules that are the same for everybody. So that if you're going to have allow ride-sharing drivers to drive around anywhere and pick up a passenger, do you think it should be the same for the taxi, so it's the same?
Yes, we would say that the rules should be the same for both types of drivers, and that drivers should really have the flexibility to choose their own service areas, and that will kind of allow the market to say this particular area has really high demand, and so there will naturally become more drivers in that area versus another area.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you let the free market drive it.
Yeah.
Right. Layla Wright is my guest, Associate Deputy Commissioner at the Federal Competition Bureau of Canada. Can you tell me if the government went ahead and overlooked the recommendations that you're making here, and they brought in these caps, they put in caps in the number of drivers allowed in ride sharing, they put in these boundaries where drivers could operate, they put in price controls and said, we're going to set your prices, we're not going to let you set your prices. Would that be counter to federal law in any way? Like I'm thinking the Federal Competition Act?
So we're not a decision maker in this. We don't mandate the province to do anything. It wouldn't be counter to the Competition Act to do that. So what we're doing is offering advice on how to foster competition, and we hope that the BC government takes our advice into consideration.
Okay, what if they don't, though? Do you guys have any kind of investigative powers or any kind of enforcement powers at all?
Our enforcement work is quite separate from our advocacy work, and our advocacy work really focuses on providing advice to regulators.
Okay. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
So now the government wants to chop up the divisions or the areas where you're allowed to do Uber driving. What areas are you allowed to work in? They're thinking of giving a different insurance to pay, all this red tape just to be part of a ride-sharing program. Where in other countries, it is what it is. You just sign up, put yourself available, and go out and drive people around and make a little bit of extra money on the side. Now, Canada is doing so much, especially in British Columbia, so much red tape that's disallowing people from exploring the free market and driving the flea market. It's a flea market is what it is. It's turning into a gong show here. You don't know who's tricking or treating. So anyways, let me know. This is my rideshare update. I did an Uber rideshare, a couple of videos already on Uber and how it's affecting people here in Canada. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below. I'd love to know. I'd love to hear. Thank you for watching.